Today we are here with Gina and sorry.
Was that like a woohoo? I thought that was planned. Like we are welcoming Gina. Woohoo!
Winners never quit and quitters never win.
Quitters win all the time. Let us show you how on Quit Happens.
Hey everyone, welcome to the next episode of Quit Happens. I'm your host, Lynn Marie Morski, and I just have to start today by saying thank you. So many of you have hit the ratings button, given me 5 stars, written a review, or come up to me in person and told me what the podcast episodes have meant to you personally. And I just want to share my gratitude because it means so much to hear that. And I love the feedback. I love to hear exactly what you like, what would be more helpful. I would try to incorporate it best I can. And I appreciate the reviews and the ratings because it helps other people find the podcast. People out there may not know they need to quit, but hey, if they're thinking about it and they type in quit and Quit Happens appears, man, I would love for that to be one of their resources. So again, thank you. I appreciate you more than you know. Today's guest is Gina Mariko Rosales. Gina is the founder of Make It Mariko, an events production company up in the Bay Area. And Gina is totally infectious. She's got a great energy. She's got a great story. And I hope you enjoy listening to our chat as much as I enjoyed chatting with her. So without further ado.
Hello, everyone. This is Lynn Marie. Welcome to the next episode of Quit Happens. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm here today with Gina, as I told you about in the introduction. Hello, Gina.
Hi, welcome.
I'm so glad you could be with us. I have never met Gina in person. This is the first time we are chatting, but I heard about Gina from another podcast guest, Andrew Belinsky. He connected us via Facebook somehow because he said you had a great quitting story. And he said, Gina quit X. It's called X, right? Just
yes,
X by itself.
Technically, yeah, formerly known as Google X, and then now just known as X.
Gotcha. Okay. And I was like, oh, wow. And I went to the same thing that a lot of people probably do. It's like, what a dream job. I would do anything for Google X. I would, be the greeter at their door if they wanted me to. And so I figured, I was in that same position. I was in what people thought was a dream job doing sports medicine, and it wasn't my dream. And so I was really excited to hear Gina talk about leaving what many people would think of as a dream job. So thank you for joining us to tell your story. And if you could start by telling us, how long did you work at X?
So I've been working at Google/Google X for about 7 years. So it would have been 7 years when I quit in February.
Okay. And what was the first inclination you had that maybe a change or a quit needed to happen?
Yeah, totally. So, when I joined Google in the first place 7 years ago, I kind of always knew that it was going to be a temporary job. I actually didn't even anticipate myself staying there 7 years, but it was an amazing company. There was tons of opportunities, and I kept moving into roles that still excited me, and I was learning things from. So I ended up staying a long time. But I think the catalyst of what really made me realize I needed to make a change in my life was actually something really tragic that happened to my family and in my life. About in 2011, it was that my first cousin, he actually died by suicide. And it was just an extremely traumatic and unexpected thing that really rocked my entire life and changed my whole family. And after that happened, it really just changed my perspective of life in general. I now saw the world as something that someplace where tomorrow is not a guarantee. What if I died tomorrow? What if something else happened tomorrow? And I wanted to live a life that truly reflected who I am and what I felt like my purpose was in the world. And at that time where I was currently working, even though it was a dream job, it wasn't what I felt like I was put on this world to do.
Gotcha. And what were the symptoms or signs that told you it wasn't what you were there to do? Were you having any anxiety, or was it just a general sense of, restlessness?
Totally. I think restlessness is exactly the word. I would explain it also as like having a mini identity crisis, where every day I would wake up. I live in San Francisco. I would wake up and get in line, get dropped off at the Google shuttle stop and stand in line waiting for my shuttle. And while I was standing there, in my head, I would be thinking thoughts like every car that passed by, I imagined them looking at me and judging me, saying like, oh, look at her. She's just one of those tech people. And in my head, I would respond back saying, no, I'm not like that. I'm actually from here. I used to work in nonprofits. I run my own nonprofit. I'm not one of these people. So that was like crazy to experience that in my head every single day, going to work. And even though I enjoyed everything I did while I was at work, I felt like I wasn't myself. And I felt like also just so disconnected from the city that I love, which is San Francisco. I was just spending all day in Mountain View and coming home exhausted, watching TV and then going to sleep and doing it all over the next day.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The fatigue, especially, you want to feel like your nights are not just recovering from your days.
Exactly. And I know that I was like, so, all the tech folks are so privileged of like, we don't have to drive, we have a shuttle, but still like the quality of life of spending 4 hours of my day on a shuttle every day, it was just not what I wanted. And I'm a dancer. I've been dancing forever. I stopped dancing during those times, and that was just not okay. Like not okay for me.
Yeah, that's rough because you don't have the time to dance, and dance is probably your recovery, self-care outlet. And
exactly.
So that fatigue's never going to get any better because you can't do the things that would make you less fatigued.
Exactly.
Spiral from there. And I also appreciate you mentioned something that I tend to discuss often, which is identity. And often quits are hard because people are quitting an identity that, not that they disliked. It's generally just the identity they had, found. Oh, I'm a wife and a mother, or I'm a doctor or a lawyer. But I like how you brought up that your quit came about when you realized that the identity society had given you was not in line necessarily with your actual identity.
Exactly. Like even like going out when I'm at a restaurant or sitting at a bar by myself and just having casual conversation with a stranger, you introduce yourself and say who you are, what you do. And when people would ask me, I would always respond, but then put a disclaimer at the end. So I'd say something to the extent of like, oh, hey, I'm Gina Rosales. I'm the marketing events manager at Google X. But on the side, I run a nonprofit dance company, and that's my real passion. So I wanted to get to a place where I didn't need those disclaimers anymore, where I could just say, this is who I am, this is what I do, and that's who I am.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a worthwhile thing to take note of. If you are always parenthetically disclaiming what you do, maybe you shouldn't be doing that thing anymore.
Right.
So when you realize this, and you realize through the tragedy that struck your family that like, I've got to be doing something more in alignment, what were the first steps you took? And I guess maybe you can even tell me before or after this, but what fears might have come up at that time?
Yeah, totally. So at that time, I knew that I wanted to do something different. I knew I wanted to be reconnected to my community. I knew I wanted to do something that I felt passionate about. And I wasn't really sure what that was. I realized at the time that events was something I was really passionate about. I started thinking about like, what is it that when I do it, I feel the most happy and I feel the most like myself. And I thought back at all the events that I was doing at that time, and I loved the energy and the high that I got doing those. And I loved the me that I was while I was doing those because I was good at it. But I wasn't sure how to do that. So I actually first started off by trying to find other jobs where I could just make event planning my full time. So I actually looked around Google. I was interviewing for full-time event roles. I was looking outside, and they weren't really panning out. So that was kind of like, okay, well, what am I going to do? At the same time, I had a cousin who also went through this family tragedy with me, who had also just started her own business, a floral business. And I looked at her, and she gave me faith, and she gave me hope that like, you know what, I could do the same thing. So, then at that point, I decided like, I'm going to start my own company. And then with that came all of the fears of, how do I do that? Can I do that? I would question myself, like, who are you to start your own company? You're just some short little Asian girl The only people that I saw raising money and doing things like that were really rich, right, white men. I didn't feel like I had access to that space. So those are all fears that was definitely going on in my head.
And what about the fears that we discussed earlier? That maybe not the fear, but having to deal with the fact that when you bring potentially quitting X to other people or any Google related corporation to
Mhm.
other people who probably think like, wow, what would I do to just work at Google?
Yep.
You have that secondary, like, how do I explain this to people? Even though you don't have to explain anything to anybody, I'm sure that probably came up more than once.
It totally did. I mean, my parents, immigrated here from the Philippines and Japan, and they've worked really hard, and of course they want the best for me. And my mom was so proud and that I worked at Google. So every single person I told I was quitting, maybe not every single, maybe 5% of people understood, and the rest were kind of like, "Why? You're crazy. That job's amazing. It's so secure. Why would you leave that security?" And then, sometimes I would explain and I would just say, yeah, but it's not my dream and it's not what I want to do. And life is short and I want to live it, spend the days that I have doing what I love. And that was just kind of the end of it. So thankfully, I was not as influenced by those people. And I try really, really hard to spend the majority of my time around people who are on the same path as me and who understand where I'm going and support me in that.
That's huge. Absolutely huge. I always say when you're preparing for a quit, it's really important to prepare your relationships for a quit. Some you can choose, like your friends that you surround you with, that you surround yourself with, you can generally choose. But if that close knit support system, like your family, your immediate family, or the friends that you see every day are not supporting you, it's just going to make it much more difficult. So where you can choose people who are on that same path, who understand, who are going to support your quit. Because quitting is not easy.
Totally, totally. And even that piece of advice goes, once you actually successfully quit and do whatever it is you want to do, you have to continually support yourself because you're always going to have those fears. It never ends.
Right, right. I mean, especially on your own, making without that regular paycheck coming in, you have to hustle and do all those things. That's another separate level of, say, insecurity. How did you make the transition from one to the other?
Right. So I spent about 2 years like working on business proposals, meeting with partners, developing a website that was getting ready to launch. And then I decided to launch it on my 30th birthday as kind of like a present to myself. So that was the day of my launch party, and that I filed all my business licenses and everything. And I was planning on quitting, and actually, a director at X approached me even before she found out and offered me another job. And she actually offered me the job to run marketing events for the company, which was crazy because that was my dream job ever since I joined Google. And I remember telling her, like, oh my God, I really want to accept, but don't tell anyone, but I'm actually quitting in 3 months.
Oh, wow.
And so, that happened. We ended the conversation, and eventually I ended up asking her about part time. And thankfully, everything aligned and it actually made sense for it to be a part time role. So she allowed me to stay part time. So that way I was still working at X, I was still an employee, I had benefits, but then I was running my company on the side. And I negotiated to also work from home because that commute was killing me. So I had this really interesting schedule for about 2 years where I'd go into the office only once a week and then just work independently from home. And I was super productive, and it allowed me to start my business without that fear and to have a little cushion so that I could make decisions for my business without worrying about money. So I can make the decisions best based on what was best for my business.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, there's so many good things in there. First off, the commute was killing you and you had identified that. Like, so even if they're here on a platter is your Google ideal job marketing events planner, correct?
Yep.
That you still knew that doing that commute was toxic enough, but that it wasn't necessary to quit the whole thing right then. It's genius that you went to them and expressed that and managed to get a work from home situation. I always say, like, if you love your job and it's just the commute that's killing you, do not throw out the whole job. If you
Right.
don't have to, if that's all, if you love everything else about it, just ask. At this day and age, most jobs would have a hard time saying you can't work from home at any point, depending on the situation. But man, I work for the government, I work at the VA. There are plenty of people even within the VA that work from home. And I think, again, it's just a matter of, if you're in a place that will support you, great. They're going to probably support your desire to try your side thing in whatever, and I love that Google was that place, and they understood.
Yeah, I mean, I feel I'm not going to lie and say that that is something that they would probably allow a lot of people to do. But it was great that, I had already put in a lot of my time. I had been with the company 6 years already, had proven my value. And so I'm so thankful that they recognized that and were able to, keep me on. And then so I did that for about 2 years. And then after 2 years, my business got to a place where I had a bunch of clients. I was thriving. I was thinking about bringing on another staff member. And I just finally realized, like, you know what? I think I'm done. I think I'm ready to just dedicate myself full time to this and see how I can take it to the next level. And so that's how I got to this February. I can't believe it's only been a few months. It feels like so long time when I finally like fully cut the cord and left.
How did that go? How did you feel?
Oh, it was like I was planning it. I knew that I wanted to do it since the end of last year. And I was excited. I was just so excited to just grow and kind of expand and like fully commit myself to it. So it was really more just excitement and also just being thankful for what X had given me and knowing that I wanted to leave them in a good place when I left and keep those relationships great.
Yes, yes. You're like the poster child for perfection in strategic quitting.
Oh.
There are like 5 steps to strategic quits, and you're like, well, I went through this one very well, and this one and this one. And I mean, down to the final step in strategic quitting is how you quit, and to quit well, and to not burn your bridges. And like you said, you teed them up so that I'm sure whoever was taking over for you was much more easily aligned with what they needed to do than had you just left.
Totally. I forgot to mention too that like throughout that 2 year or that process before I went part-time, I actually also started going to counseling. So, Google had this really great counseling program where you could get 10 free sessions. So I started seeing a counselor to help me kind of work through some of my fears. And then I also I joined this class that Google had. It was called Stretch. And the class was all about supporting mid-career women to help them with their leadership. So I actually joined that class with the intention of getting the guts to start my own company. So all of those kind of things put together. And then, my husband was also very supportive because he had experienced his own quit. He used to be a lawyer and quit that to become a teacher. So he was like fully on board with my quit too.
Wow. Would love to talk to your husband. That's a big time quit, a very big time quit. I'd love to hear the story and what he went through as well. Another episode. But and you mentioned your family. I forgot to ask when you mentioned the time. They were so proud of you working there. How did they end up taking the quit? I mean, I'm sure they're very supportive, but how did that go down?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of, skepticism at first, just thinking like, well, why? Why do you need to quit all the way? Or, just run it part-time or something like that. But just, I think the sheer just what my family had gone through together with that family tragedy, it brought us all together and they really understood. And we're all at a place where we're more just supportive of each other and open. So in the end, my mom gave me a bunch of speeches, but in the end, they were all at my launch party celebrating and proud still.
I love that. That's amazing. So if people want to find you, I'm assuming you work mostly in the Bay Area. That's where you're at still.
Yes, yeah, based in San Francisco, but doing events all over the Bay and sometimes traveling to a few other U.S. cities here and there.
Okay, cool. Well, for any Bay Area listeners, if you'd let us know where they could find you.
Yeah, totally. So makeitmariko.com. It's MARIKO is my website. And then I'm on Instagram at makeitmariko as well. Those are the best places to find me.
Excellent. I really appreciate you sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. All right. For everyone else out there, until next time, happy quitting.